You were my favorite hero as a kid. Okay, you don't want to do this.
Everybody always has the same holes over and over again. It gets so fucking boring. Sometimes you just gotta make your own. And then fuck them.
No!
You know, I really like The Boys. It's a great show, and I'm kind of surprised it's taken me this long to make a video about them. I love so many things about the series actually, but what I especially love is Eric Kripke's ability to turn what is a truly terrible comic and create a show that is funny, edgy, and also is able to critique a lot of the flaws in our society. In fact, I think if you are making an adaptation, The Boys is a great example of what you can do with source material and create a world of your own, because it is really nothing like the comic. I like a lot of the points that the show has made, but I especially liked the way that they handled the essaying of Starlight, or Annie as she's known now in the show, and it was just really surprising to see any piece of media realistically handle such a serious issue like SA. In an interview, he talked about how he had to give this scene special attention, that it was so carefully done because he was worried that if he did put a foot wrong, the outcome could be very hurtful to the audience. You would think that given everything that I've just said and everything that we've seen so far, that Kripke is someone who really seems to understand sexual violence, that he understands the impact that putting this into his art can really have, both positively or potentially negatively. That is, of course, until we saw season 4, episode 6 of The Boys. And I think right there is when we saw Eric Kripke's thoughts on sexual violence towards men, and how he doesn't exactly think that it's the same heinous act as when it's done to women. Let's take a look at the contrast in tone of these two scenes and see if we notice any differences. In the Starlight scene, Annie is the new member of the Seven, taking a tour with the Deep, a veteran of the team. She's vulnerable with him and tells him how much this means to her, that it's all a dream come true, that he was actually her favorite hero growing up. But being a serial abuser, the Deep exploits her trust and his power and forces himself on her.
Whoa, 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 hey, look, you're gorgeous. I'm not talking about sex, just a little bit of pole smoking. Whoa, 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 hey, wait. It's just a question of how bad you want to be in the Seven. Thing is, I am number 2 around here. So, if I say so, you know, you'd be out of here. You and me, just roll with the punches for like 3 minutes, maybe. It's not a big deal. And then you know what happens? All your dreams come true.
In this scene, the tone is painfully clear, and thankfully we don't actually have to sit through any of the actual violence taking place. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that no one actually respects the Deep in the Seven, but Annie doesn't know that, and he uses this to take advantage of her, to exert his power over her in the situation. She cannot say no, she doesn't have a choice, and the show takes this very seriously, as it should be. Hughie's scene is very different. We can all clearly tell, even with a mask on, that Hughie is not okay with this. He does not consent. But the show doesn't treat it the same way Annie's abuse is. The scene creates less urgency, and the only tension is within the one thing The Boys always builds tension in, making the scene gross or humiliating to the point you can't believe what you're watching. As Tek Kight and Angela violate Hughie, all in the form of comic relief. And that comedy is in the fact that Hughie can't say no. He can't opt out because he doesn't know Webweaver's safe word, so he has no choice over what's happening to him. And no, it doesn't matter that Tek Kight and Angela don't know that this is Hughie, not Webweaver. They are not intentionally abusing him, but it doesn't matter because the abuse is definitely still taking place. What does matter is someone's consent got taken away. Ultimately, we as the viewer are fully aware of what is happening. We are not ignorant like any of the characters here, and so is Eric Kripke. What's more though, is this isn't the first time. In fact, pretty routinely has to deal with some kind of abuse or harassment, and it's always played as a funny joke. That we should be laughing that he's so bothered by dicks touching him all the time without his consent. The Deep was also essayed in the first season as well. Although not treated as a joke necessarily, it's still shown in almost a disrespectful way in regards to him. But all three of these scenes are identical in the way they are treated. 1, the abuse is shown. 2, it's seen as comedic or not to be shown with any sympathy. And 3, there is no respect for the characters or the audience that may have suffered through something similar. Whether you are still skeptical of the point I'm trying to make, I just want to ask you one simple question. Do you think that Kripke would ever replace the men in these given scenes and replace them with women? The answer is obviously no, because he understands the impact of not treating SA properly in his media. So why do it to anyone at all? I'm thankful I waited to get this video out because in the last part of this episode, Hughie does mention how the event affected him a little bit. This was a little confusing for me as far as what Hughie is being fully impacted by here, but it gave me some small hope that they might course correct later on. Unfortunately, it only got worse. At the end of episode 7, Annie is replaced by the Shifter, who has sex with Hughie multiple times between this episode and the season finale. They're able to blend in, mostly unnoticed to Hughie at first because the Shifter can also read minds and take on the personality of Annie. They also propose to Hughie and make him put his mom's ring on their finger just to rub it in a little extra, while the Shifter torments Annie and picks at all her fears and insecurities. Obviously, she's very hurt by this, and once she gets back to Hughie, she takes her frustrations out on him.
You put the ring on her finger, Hughie. I know, because I pried it off her fucking dead hand.
And Hughie handles this like a bumbling idiot and has to make everything right with her.
Hello? You okay? Look, I thought I was getting engaged to you, all right? She looks just like you. You know, right down to that freckle that you have down.
So you did fuck her?
I mean, you know.
How many times?
Had to be less than 20.
I have a few issues with this. For one, we are still completely overshadowing what happened to Hughie in episode 6, which he also expressed to Annie at least in some way, and we're just going to ignore the fact that he is now realizing that he just had sex with someone who was pretending to be his girlfriend. Hughie would probably be very confused and traumatized by this too, and this episode makes Hughie out to be a sex-hungry freak in a way. It really undermines everything that just happened to him. It feels inconsistent with both of their characters. Of course, Annie would be pretty upset and confused about what just happened, but she's usually, all things considered, a pretty understanding and level-headed person, which is why for me it doesn't really make sense in the first place. Hughie is generally inconsistent for sure, and definitely a flawed character, don't get me wrong. But even as he can be written a little bit unrealistically sometimes, I still think if we are treating him as if he were a real person, this still shouldn't invalidate what happened to him, and I think Kripke sees him specifically as an imperfect victim, not deserving of any sympathy at all. Eric Kripke very clearly gives us his outlook on things through his art. And if we circle back to the whole Deep scene, I think a lot of people would say, well, you know, quote, he's an abuser, so obviously it's okay that he's being abused. And look, it's not that I don't want him to receive some sort of justice, because obviously he's a terrible person and has proven to be throughout the show. It's just that abuse is abuse, and it does not make it okay no matter what. He should face justice, but that is not justice. But Kripke thinks that revenge of some kind needs to be taken here, and this is the form that he chooses. And personally, as someone who has been privileged realistically to hear the stories of abuse victims and been trusted with this, I can tell you that most people do not actually want to have their abuser abused, and for that matter, anybody to go through the same things that they went through. They wish that this trauma obviously had never happened at all, but realistically, what they want is probably a little bit of justice, and mainly, most importantly, what they want is for people to hear them, to listen to them, to understand that their pain is real and acknowledge it. You also have this interview in contrast with the one about Annie. When Kripke was asked why he made this scene with Hughie getting SA'd, he said he thinks that it's a dark way to look at it, and he actually finds the scene very funny. Look, this isn't to say that Eric Kripke can't, learn from this, that he can't change his perspective on this. And to be honest, he's far from the worst of these douchebag filmmakers and writers that are all over this industry and other industries of media that have no respect and no regard for this specific issue and the people that it affects. There are filmmakers that will literally put full-on rape scenes in their production just because shock value. There really isn't anything deeper than that. And so they have absolutely no care and no respect for the damage and the trauma and someone experiencing what is possibly one of the worst experiences as a human being you could ever have in your entire life. And to make a broader point, this is not just a problem of media, of course, this is a problem of society. I mean, in my opinion, we really do not take SA very seriously at all. Think of any famous abuse case and you will find people completely denying the victim any of their truth, any of their pain, and calling them terrible things because they couldn't imagine that this other person could do this terrible thing just because they watch them or they entertain them or something. And even if they kind of understand that this is a bad thing, there is still a misogynistic way that we treat especially women in this specific situation. But to bring it back around to the point of this video, society's view is that this doesn't happen to men or boys, which is why you see so much media just making a joke out of it, not taking it seriously at all. Meanwhile, so many of them suffer in silence. I know he'll never see this, that's not the point of this video. But I think if someone were to ever get into Eric Kripke's ear and let him know that he definitely did hurt a lot of people with this, I think that he can come around and he can learn to treat everyone with this same level of respect. And with all the art we've seen before, with all the other great opinions that he's had before, I know that he can.